The sea was calm that morning, too calm. A thick mist rolled over the water, swallowing the horizon and muffling every sound but the quiet hum of my boat's tired engine. I wasn't heading anywhere special, just an old man on his final fishing trip. At least, that's what I told myself. Then, out of nowhere, the Coast Guard appeared. Lights flashing, boat steady. They didn't call me over right away. Instead, they circled like they were watching something dangerous. I waved. Nothing. When they finally boarded, they weren't loud or aggressive. They were quiet, nervous, like they'd seen a ghost. One young officer checked my ID. His face went pale. He leaned in and whispered to his superior. The commanding officer looked me straight in the eye. "Name, sir?" he asked. I hesitated, then said, "Captain Walter." Briggs. Silence fell. Radios crackled. Every man on that boat stepped back, like they'd just heard the name of a legend or a monster. They didn't speak at first, just stared. I could see it in their eyes, confusion mixed with fear. One officer lowered his hand to his sidearm, not out of aggression, but instinct. "You said ... Walter Briggs?" The commanding officer asked again, as if trying to convince himself he'd heard wrong. I nodded. "Captain Walter H. Briggs, retired." A long pause. Then a murmur spread through the crew. One of the younger guards stepped back like he'd seen a ghost. "It can't be," he whispered. I knew then that my past had followed me here. Not everyone forgets what happened in the Strait of Hormuz in '87, or what I did to survive. I never thought I'd hear that name whispered like a warning again. What came next? Well, let's just say it changed the course of my quiet retirement. If you're intrigued by this story, stick around. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and leave a comment. I want to know what you think. Happened next. You won't believe where this goes. The officer's demeanor shifted. His posture straightened, voice more careful, now like he was addressing someone far above his rank. "Sir, I need to ask, where have you been all these years?" I chuckled, not out of amusement, but habit. Fishing, walking, forgetting. His eyes scanned my face, as if trying to match it with an old photo. Then, quietly, he asked, "Is it true what they said about the Liberty Dawn?" I looked out at the water. That name hadn't touched my ears in over 3 decades. The Liberty Dawn was the ship that vanished under my command in '87. Official reports said it went down in hostile waters. But the truth, that truth never made it into the paperwork. I could feel the memories clawing back up, one wave at a time. The sea never forgets, and apparently, neither does the Coast Guard. Whatever they were here for, it wasn't just a routine check. They wanted answers. And they were about to get more than they bargained for. The young officer pulled out a sealed file from a waterproof case. He handed it to the commander, who opened it slowly, glancing at me between pages. I caught a glimpse of old photos, satellite maps, and a classified naval report. My name was printed in red across the top. Red meant classified. "This report says your vessel was sunk, that all hands were lost." His voice wasn't accusatory, just unsettled. "And yet here you are, alive, unaged." I smiled faintly. "I aged plenty, just not the way they expected." He leaned forward. "What really happened out there, Captain?" I didn't answer. I couldn't, not yet, because even after all these years, I wasn't sure how to explain it without sounding insane. What we encountered wasn't a storm. It wasn't pirates. It wasn't even human. But it changed us, and it made sure the world would never hear the truth. Until now. I looked the officer dead in the eye and said, "You ready to hear something you'll never be allowed to repeat?" It started with a light no, not lightning. It was ... deliberate. Controlled. It appeared above the waterline just after sunset. glowing like a flare, but silent. We thought it was a distress signal, maybe from a downed aircraft, so we turned toward it. That was our first mistake. The closer we got, the more distorted the instruments became. Compass spun, radios died. Even the stars above us seemed to shift, as if we'd crossed into some place we weren't meant to be. Then, just like that, the light vanished. And so did the Liberty Dawn signal from every radar on Earth. I remember the silence that followed. It wasn't natural. No wind, no waves, just stillness, like the ocean itself was holding its breath. The next thing I knew, we weren't where we'd been. Coordinates were off by hundreds of miles. And the men, not all of them came back. Some just disappeared. Others changed. And one begged me to never speak of it again. Of the 32 crewmen aboard the Liberty Dawn, only 19 returned, but not one of us came back whole. Chief Petty Officer Morales, a man I'd trusted with my life, refused to speak for days. When he finally did, all he whispered was, "It watched me," over and over. Another man, Dixon, lost all memory of who he was. Sat staring at his own reflection for hours like he didn't recognize the face in the glass. And then there was Gallagher, my radio tech. He began drawing symbols, strange ones. No one could trace their origin. Not language, not math, just ... wrong. He said he saw them in the sky, pulsing behind his eyes every time he blinked. Command. Locked it all away. We were scattered, relocated, retired early, told never to speak of it. I tried to forget. Lord knows I tried. But how do you forget something, an erased part of who you are? Something that knew your name before you ever spoke it? That's why I kept quiet until today. The commanding officer kept flipping through the file, slower now, more cautious. These documents say your debrief was sealed under Executive Code Black. That's Cold War level secrecy. I nodded. They buried it deeper than any scandal you've heard of. We weren't heroes. We were liabilities. I leaned on this railing, staring out at the same waters that once swallowed my ship. They didn't want survivors, just silence. He looked shaken, unsure whether to arrest me or salute me. "Sir, what exactly did you encounter?" I hesitated. "I don't know what it was. Only that it wasn't from here." The moment it appeared, the ocean changed. Like time bent around it. We saw things future storms, echoes of voices not our own. And when it was gone, we were changed. Every last one of us. He took a step back. "You're saying it wasn't natural?" I locked eyes with him. "It wasn't of this world." That's when the wind shifted. Cold, sudden, and very familiar. The air turned colder unnaturally so. I watched the young officers glance around, their breath now visible in the midday light. One of them reached for his radio, but it only hissed static. The same kind of static we heard that night, just before everything fell apart. I felt it deep in my bones, not fear recognition. "It's happening again," I muttered. The commander looked alarmed. "What is?" I pointed to the sky. "Watch the birds." They were gone. Not a single gull in sight. The ocean was still, too still. Even the waves held back, like something was waiting. Then came the low hum. Barely audible, but it vibrated through the hull. I'd heard that sound once before, right before the Liberty Dawn disappeared. The commander barked orders, but it was too late. The youngest crewman dropped his gear and ran to the stern, staring into the fog. "Something's out there," he said. "It's watching us." I didn't argue, because I could feel it too. Watching, waiting. The fog thickened, curling around the deck like fingers. Visibility dropped to near zero. The hum grew louder, pulsing in waves as if sinking with our heartbeats. I stood still, I'd learned not to run when it came. Movement drew its attention. The others didn't know that. One officer stumbled toward the bow, flashlight swinging wildly. "Contact at starboard," someone yelled, but there was nothing, just mist. Then a shape emerged. Not a boat, not a whale. It hovered just above the water, silent and seamless, like a piece of the sky had fallen into the ocean. Lights shimmered beneath its surface symbols, like the ones Gallagher used to draw. I turned to Commander. "You need to leave, now." "What is that?" he asked. "A warning," I said. "Or maybe a test. We don't belong here." Suddenly, the object blinked out of sight, but the hum remained. Louder, closer. The youngest officer began to cry. I couldn't blame him. I'd seen brave men lose their minds to what came next. The hum grew unbearable, vibrating through every bone. Radios were dead, instruments frozen. The crew was on edge and shaking, others gripping their weapons like it was their last hope. I barked orders to keep calm, but inside I felt the same dread I'd known 30 years ago. The mist thickened further, and out of it emerged whispers, barely audible voices that seemed to speak in a language older. Then time. Gallagher's symbols flashed in my mind, and I knew this wasn't just a haunting. It was a message. The youngest officer dropped to his knees, clutching his head. "Make it stop," he begged. I tried to steady him, but the fear was contagious. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the hum stopped. Silence crashed down like a wave. The fog lifted. The object was gone. But the damage was done. We had crossed a one that no man should cross. And whatever was out there, it was still waiting. The silence after the hum was suffocating. No one spoke, but I could feel their eyes on me. The old captain who'd somehow survived a nightmare no one else understood. I knew it was time to confess, to tell them the truth I'd buried deep. "There's more to that night than what's in the files," I said quietly. "What happened to the Liberty Dawn? It wasn't an accident. It was a mission gone wrong. We were sent into waters no one knew existed, chasing a signal, something that could change the course of history." The commander's face hardened. "Why keep this secret?" I looked away. "Because some truths are too dangerous. Because I was ordered to keep silent. And because some things shouldn't be brought back." The crew absorbed my words. Some skeptical, others haunted. But the question lingered. What had I really encountered? And why did it still follow me? The crew was silent after my confession, but the unease hung thick in the air. We weren't just dealing with nature or chance anymore. The real enemy was unseen, lurking beneath the waves, watching our every move. I told them about the strange signals we'd intercepted before the mission, coded messages that didn't come from any known source. They weren't just warnings, they were traps. We were walking into an ambush, I said. Something was waiting for us, something ancient. The youngest officer finally spoke up, voice trembling. "Why didn't you tell us this before?" I shook my head, "Because I wanted to protect you. The truth can destroy a man." But now, with the Coast Guard watching me like I was a relic of a forgotten war, the past was catching up. And I could feel it closing in, just like that day on the Liberty Dawn. Something was coming, something I couldn't stop. We spent hours scanning the horizon, hoping for answers. Then the radios crackled to life for a moment. A voice, distorted and broken, whispered in a language none of us recognized. The signal repeated, layered with strange symbols and static, like a code trying to break through. I knew that voice. It was the same eerie sound we'd intercepted before our doomed voyage years ago. The crew's nerves frayed. Some wanted to turn back, but I told them the truth. We couldn't run from what we'd stirred. The sea was sending a message, and it was meant for me. Or maybe for all of us. As the sun dipped low, Shadows danced on the water's surface. I felt eyes on me, watching, waiting, ready to decide our fate. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about facing a legacy buried deep beneath the waves. Night fell heavy and fast. The ocean seemed to hold its breath beneath a thick blanket of stars. Below the surface, unseen shapes moved too large and deliberate to be fish. The crew was on edge, whispers growing into silent prayers. I remembered the feeling from that night on the Liberty Dawn, a presence that was both there and not there, watching but never fully revealing itself. The Coast Guard captain looked to me for answers I didn't have. I could only warn them, don't look too long into the dark water. Some things will stare back. Then suddenly, the water around the boat shimmered, glowing faintly blue. A wave rolled gently against the hull, but it carried a chilling message. The sea wasn't just a place to sail. It was a place to remember, to fear, and to never underestimate. The glowing beneath the waves grew brighter, casting eerie reflections on the crew's tense faces. It wasn't just light, it was a signal, pulsating rhythmically, like a heartbeat from the depths. I knew this wasn't a natural phenomenon. Years ago, on the Liberty Dawn, we saw the same signal just before everything went wrong. Now, it was here again. The youngest officer asked, voice shaking, "Captain, what does it mean?" I looked at him, my own fear masked by years of hardened resolve. "It's a warning," I said. "A message from something ancient, something powerful. It's telling us to turn back." But turning back wasn't an option anymore. Not when. The past had come knocking on our door. The sea was alive with secrets that could change everything we thought we knew about the world. And for the first time in decades, I was ready to face them head on. Years of silence weighed heavily on me. The memories I kept locked away, visions of lost men, broken promises, and a secret too vast for words surfaced like relentless tides. The crew looked at me, expecting answers, but I only had fragments. I carried this burden alone, I confessed, because the truth could shatter more than just reputations. Their eyes softened, understanding the cost of silence. But silence had a price. The Coast Guard's unexpected arrival pulled that price into the open. Now there was no turning back. I could feel the past closing in, like a shadow stretching. Across the water, whatever I'd faced before wasn't done with me. It was waiting, patient and unforgiving. And this time, it wanted everything. The crew's unease grew as shadows danced just beyond the fog. The sea seemed alive with whispers. Only I could hear, reminders of the horrors we faced decades ago. "There's something beneath," I warned them, voice low and steady. "Not just water and fish. Something watching, waiting to strike." The youngest guard clutched his rifle tighter, eyes darting nervously. I remembered how, on the Liberty Dawn, we were hunted by something that defied explanation, a presence that warped reality itself. The Coast Guard's usual confidence faltered, replaced by a creeping dread. As night closed in, the line between friend and foe blurred. Trust was a fragile thing when the enemy might be invisible, and possibly inside the boat with us. Night enveloped the boat like a shroud. The only sounds were the creak of wood and distant, eerie whispers, carried by the wind voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere. The crew huddled in small groups, eyes wide with fear. I felt it too, the weight of unseen eyes, the sensation that we were no longer alone. Gallagher's old drawings came to mind, the strange symbols that hinted at another realm, one where time and space twisted. Suddenly, the youngest officer swore he heard his name called from the depths. We all froze. Was it a trick of the mind? Or was the sea reaching out, trying to pull us under? I knew then that the true battle wasn't for survival, but for our very souls. One by one, men began to vanish. At first, It was just rumors disappearing from their bunks, gone by morning without a trace. The fog thickened, swallowing whole sections of the boat in silence. Panic set in, but there was nowhere to run. The water seemed to pulse with a life of its own, calling them below. I searched every corner, every shadow, but all I found were empty spaces where laughter once lived. The remaining crew looked to me, desperate for answers I didn't have. "We're losing more than men," I said quietly. "We're losing ourselves." The line between reality and nightmare blurred as the sea's grip tightened. I feared what would happen next, because I knew the sea never let go easily. The radio crackled to life, unexpected and brief. A voice, barely audible, whispered a warning. "Don't trust the water. It takes more than bodies." Then silence. The crew was frozen, eyes locked on the dead microphone. I recognized that voice. It was one of our missing men, or at least what was left of him. The message was clear. Something beyond comprehension was hunting us. We were trapped in a nightmare with no escape. The Coast Guard captain looked at me, fear and disbelief battling in his eyes. "Captain, what now?" I took a deep breath, knowing there was only one thing left to do: face the darkness head on. But the sea had already claimed too much, and it wasn't finished yet. The night thickened with an almost tangible dread. Every shadow seemed to lengthen. Every whisper grew louder, echoing inside my mind like a relentless drumbeat. The crew was exhausted, worn thin by fear and loss. I knew we had to make a choice: fight the unknown or surrender to it. "We can't run," I told them, voice steady but heavy. "It's time to face what we awakened." The boat creaked as if responding to my words. The waters churned, glowing faintly beneath us, a silent challenge. Then, from the depths, came a shape vague but massive, a silhouette against the black sea. The moment was electric, filled with promise and peril. The final battle wasn't just for survival anymore. It was for our souls, our sanity, and our truth. As the monstrous shadow loomed closer, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This was the moment I had feared and awaited for decades. The shape emerged, an otherworldly vessel, silent and shimmering, adorned with the same symbols Gallagher once sketched. The reality hit me like a tidal wave. What we faced wasn't an enemy, but a message. A warning from an ancient intelligence far beyond human understanding. "We were never meant to find this," I whispered. The crew's fear shifted to awe and confusion. The ocean held secrets older than mankind's secrets we'd dared to uncover. The truth was both terrifying and humbling. And it was only the beginning. The strange vessel hovered just beyond reach, a silent sentinel of the deep. I sensed a presence not hostile, but watchful. It was as if the entity was waiting for a response, testing our intentions. I stepped forward, voice steady, despite the fear knotting my gut. "We seek peace," I said. The water shimmered, and for a moment the sea was calm. The cymbals pulsed gently, and I realized this was a pact silent, ancient, and binding. The crew exchanged wary glances, unsure whether to trust the unknown or fear it. I knew one thing: whatever choice we made tonight would echo through history. The old wounds of the Liberty Dawn might finally begin to heal or open wider than ever before. As dawn broke, the strange vessel slowly faded into the mist, leaving behind an ocean eerily calm. The crew, exhausted but alive, began to breathe. Easier. I stood at the bow, feeling the weight of years lift from my shoulders. The secrets of the deep were still mysteries, but the nightmare that haunted me for decades had finally found its closure. The Coast Guard captain approached quietly, nodding with a mixture of respect and disbelief. "You survived," he said simply. I smiled faintly. We all survived. But some things will never be the same. The boat turned back toward shore, the horizon glowing with possibility. The past had been faced, the future uncertain, but hope had been rekindled in the depths of despair.